Do you struggle growing delicious plump carrots in your garden? What if I told you there were 3 simple methods that will allow you to grow the best tasting carrots that you've ever grown? In today's video, we're going to delve right into these 3 techniques that are proven and easy, and they're going to allow you to become a carrot growing master in no time at all. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is Simplified Gardening. So the first method is to grow your carrots in a very tall raised bed and use sharp sand and a compost core. Now this involves filling the bed with sharp sand, and this bed takes around about 2.5 tons of sharp sand. Now for those of you thinking that's a lot of money to fork out, it's a great way of having a dedicated bed. You don't need to replace this, it's there as a structure. You then core out that sand and you basically push a drain pipe down into the sand all the way to the bottom, and you fill that core of sand that you've taken out with fine sieved compost. And the great thing about this is it gives the ideal growing environment for your carrots. It not only does that, the sharp sand holds moisture that wicks back into the carrot, but it acts as a channel forcing the carrot to go down. This makes sure that you get perfectly straight and long carrots rather than them forking and branching out, because you've sieved that compost and taken out anything that could potentially cause it to fork, and the sand acts as a way of directing that root down in a straight line. So it's a fantastic way. As you can see with this area, it takes a bit of work filling this out and what have you, but it's a great way of doing it. Next, I've then cut some plastic rings, and these sit above the compost cores, and within that we will sow 2 to 3 seeds each carrot in every single core. The reason we're sowing 3 seeds is we want to make sure that they all germinate. Once we know that there's a carrot in each core, we cut out the 2 weakest seedlings, and that way we're left with a single one. Don't pull those carrots out. If you do that, you're going to damage the root system of the carrot that you want to leave in. Just snip the tops off and that'll be it. They'll be done, and it'll leave one carrot to continue growing. The plastic ring does a number of things. Firstly, it allows you to know where the compost core is, because as water and rain hits the top of this bed, then it will obviously blend the sand and the compost core. But it also does another thing. It allows you to water in a specific place if you want to do that. But as the carrots grow, they push the top of the carrot or the shoulders of the carrot out of the ground in a process called heaving. So we can then use that ring and fill up on top of that with some more compost later on, which will cover those shoulders and stop the carrot from going green. It's a fantastic way, but not only that, it's great because it's a high raised bed. Then you don't have the issues with things like carrot root fly, because they fly closer to the ground. Now I'm going to use this bed, and we won't be covering it this year, just to see. There is one thing that could cause a problem with carrot root fly, and that is the wind lifting them to that height, but we're going to see if that makes a difference. So there are 5 benefits to this system. Firstly, it aids drainage. The sand allows the water to go through. It holds just enough so that the compost can wick that, but it allows everything else to go through, which is fantastic, because what this does is forces the carrot to go down and look for moisture. Secondly is nutrient control. What this allows the core to do, because you've actually cored out that sand and put compost in there, the nutrients are all in one place. The carrot doesn't want to spread out looking for nutrients because they're all there, and because you've used that ring at the top, you're able to feed directly above the carrot rather than spraying all over the place like you would with watering. Number 3 is soil structure. Now we've sieved this compost. It isn't just rough compost out of the compost bin or straight out of bought bagged soil, we've actually sieved it down to 1/4 inch holes. So that allows us to make a really fine medium, and this is great for the compost because it will sit there and allow that root to penetrate without being deflected in any other way. Number 4 is it reduces soil compaction because we don't have all the aggregates in there that are heavy and want to pull it down. Now the compost may sink a little bit, but it's still friable. It's easy for that root to penetrate, so it's a really good method again. And number 5, like we've already discussed, pest control. Because these are high raised beds, we shouldn't have to worry about netting them and worrying about carrot root fly. So this is a fantastic way to go. And again, because they're raised, it's going to get good airflow as well. Method number 2 is to sow carrots in a raised bed. I know we've just covered that, but this is slightly different. Again, the raised bed is exactly the same height, but this time it's filled with a different medium. It's filled with compost soil mix, manures, things like that over the years, you know, so that it's not too rich. And if that soil is moist, all you have to do is create a little drill using the side of your hand and sow your carrot seed into this very, very thinly. The thinner you sow these, the better. The last thing you want to do is to be harvesting and thinning out carrot seedlings, which can potentially attract the carrot root fly. The other advantage by sowing thinly is it's going to save you time, and it stops overcrowding and less damage when you're taking out all those extra seedlings you no longer want. So sow thinly. If the soil is dry, create your drill and then water it first before sowing the seed. And then that's literally all we have to do. Cover the seed over very lightly, give it a final watering and just allow those seeds to come through. Now, the soil in this bed is a little bit rougher than what we've put into the other carrot bed, and you can make these really fine if you want to, but I'm just looking for a different type of carrot here, and these are more short, stumpy carrots, so the likelihood of them forking anyway is much less of a worry. And that's one point of view that you need to look at when you're looking to sow your carrots. You need to look at the variety of carrot that you're sowing in the environment you're sowing it in. That will make life much easier for you. So I've already shown you 2 ways for successful carrot growing, and they are really easy, foolproof ways to grow carrots. And now I'm going to show you the 3rd way, and this way is fantastic if you only have a small space or you want to control the environment in which your carrots are growing. And this way is to grow carrots in containers. Now, the brilliant thing about this is that you control everything, to the medium that goes in there, where they're placed and everything else. Now, I'm growing my carrots here in the 30-litre containers that I use to grow my potatoes in. They come from Oakland Gardens, and they're the same containers, like I said, that I've been using for the last 12 years. They're fantastic for growing shorter carrots in, and these containers can be used for growing all sorts of things. They have been just used by a lot of people just for potatoes, but they can be used for all sorts of things. You can grow courgettes, eggplants, you know, chilies. You can grow pretty much anything in them. You just got to think about the environment that that plant needs. So we are going to use one of these containers now to grow your carrot seed in. Now there's 2 ways. You can grow just little straight drills and do line after line within this container, or you can do what I'm doing here, and that is to put in a little swirl and sow carrots in a swirl, which takes them back into the center. And this is good because you can just follow that line when you're sowing, and it spreads things out much evenly. And but what I will say is, before you do that, you need to Sieve the compost again. We don't want anything in this compost that's going to cause these roots to fork. And once you've sieved that compost, just fill it up completely to the top, put your swirl in, and then sow very finely. If the compost is dry, water it first in the drill, and then cover over and water again. Okay. The great thing about sowing with this method is you can keep it in a tunnel if frosts are due and things like that, and move it out again later. But you can place them up high, so you haven't got to worry about covering them. So if you had like a water butt like we have behind me, they could go up on there. They're like 3 feet off the ground. The likelihood of any carrot root fly getting up there is pretty low, and it will save you then having to worry about covering them. If you're going to keep them on the floor, then you're going to need to net them. But putting a net over a small container like that is really easy. And you can sow multiple containers on a successional sowing. It's very easy to just chuck some compost in a container, sow a few more carrots, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and then do the next thing and next thing. So you have a row of containers that have carrots that are developing at different times. And that's great then, because you're not having a massive glut. So carrot care, once you've sown them, well, we need to put in a little bit of feed into the compost when we're doing it. I just put a slow release feed in there, something like a bit of bloodfish and bone, but don't overdo this. Carrots prefer a soil deficient compost or soil, but by providing that little bit of feed, it can help them. But if you give too much, you will cause forking. The other thing, water. You need to water them, especially when they are, seed germinating. You've got to stop them from drying out. If they dry out, they won't germinate, or they will die after germination. So you need to give them water. A way of doing this with carrots is to cover over the drill with a plank once you've watered it, and that will stop the carrots from drying out, and then you can get them going that way. And the last thing then is the growth time, and that is usually around 65 to 75 days. So you're looking at a couple of months and they should be going to maturity. For longer carrots like we're going to do in the sand bed, they're going to take a little bit longer, obviously, and you want to grow them as long as you can until that foliage starts to die off and yellow, and then that'll be a perfect time, when that carrot can come. But carrots will stay growing continually. Eventually they'll stop and they can just sit there. If the weather is favourable, we can leave them in the ground and just harvest them as and when we need. And towards the end of winter, you could even just put a tarp over that just to protect them against the frost, and pull them as and when you want to when it comes to harvesting time. So when it comes to harvesting, we want to move some of the soil from around the shoulders of the carrot. If you're in the sand bed, you need to lift off that plastic ring over the foliage, and then once we're able to get a good hold, you want to push the carrot down, which will release its grip within the soil, and you'll be able to pull it out. Some of them are harder than others. Alternatively, you could dig the compost from around the carrot down as far as you want to harvest them. The last thing we want to be doing is snapping carrots in the ground, because we're growing them to eat, not to leave in the soil. So just take your time when it comes to harvesting them. When it comes to storing carrots, it's a great thing to do. Cut off all the foliage, but leave about an inch of foliage on the top, the stem. And once you have that, get a very soft brush and brush off any compost or dirt that's around the carrot, but do not wash them. Then we can place these into plastic boxes or cardboard boxes and store them in a dry, cool place. Now, store them pretty much like you would for potatoes. Ideal temperature would be around about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but I'll put it down by here in the video, and that will allow you to keep those carrots really good. You want to somewhere that the humidity is going to be relatively high, at least 60%, and that will allow those carrots to remain, really strong and not lose any moisture while they're in storage. So I've shown you 3 foolproof methods for growing carrots at home. And the great thing is, it's really easy. Whether you decide to grow them in a raised bed full of sharp sand and a compost core, or whether you just decide to grow them in a raised bed with just compost, or even a container with compost, the choice is yours, but you know that they're pretty much guaranteed to give you great results at home. If you found value in this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you want to know more about growing in raised beds, then this is the next video that you should watch. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is Simplified Gardening. Remember folks, you reap what you sow, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.